ICQ Podcast episode 448. Did you know Q&A? Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 448th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by Sean Borgerson, KK7 Oscar Victor Foxtrot, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, we're joined by Martin M1MRB, Dan KB6 November Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is Did You Know Q&A. Well, as always, it's your very kind donations that keep your ICQ podcast advert-free and produced for you on a fortnightly basis. Our monthly and subscription donors are vital to us because they help us provide a fund, and we really do appreciate their support every month and every year as they send those donations to us. That's been topped up this episode by Sean Borgerson, KK7 Oscar Victor Foxtrot, who sends us a one-off donation. And he says, "Hello, the ICQT. I've been enjoying your long-form podcast for a few months now from across the pond. Informative, fun, educational, and like the new friends that he's found us to be." 73s from Sean, KK7 Oscar Victor Foxtrot. So Sean, thanks a lot for that very kind feedback there. Really do appreciate your donation, and we hope you continue to enjoy the show for many, many months and years ahead. You can show your appreciation for the ICQ podcast, the value we bring you, etc. We ask for a very simple logic. It's called value for value. If you got value from today's show and you'd like to keep us advert free and us doing the work we do, visit ICQpodcast.com/donate. Turn that value, that lesson, that knowledge you've gained into a financial figure that's important to you, and then send it our way. And then you send is greatly appreciated and goes towards the running of your show. So we really do appreciate that. So visit ICQpodcast.com/donate. Right, well, we're going to work away on this episode 448 as we join Martin, Dan, Caryn, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including hams saving life in the Californian fires and a review to simplify UK licensing for visiting hams. As always, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to the ICQ Podcast, episode 448, and tonight's news roundtable, which almost didn't happen because, for some reason, the way I send the information out to the guys, they didn't get notified. And we had a bit of a panic at the start of this, but I'm sure we're going to get through it. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everyone else.
Yeah, good to have you, mate. I'm also joined by Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
Hello, Martin. Hello to our listeners from snowbound New York.
Yeah, and that's good. This side the pond, and only 50 miles down the road to me, so the nearest to me, we have Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Hi, mate. No problems. Good to have you. And last but not least, over there in Germany, where I'm sure it's cold, Ed, we have Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP.
Yeah, good evening, Martin. Good evening, team. And we're a balmy 2.5 degrees plus at the moment. So for the last couple of weeks, this is warm now. You know, the minus 10s are hopefully behind us for a while.
Well, that's a bit of luck, isn't it? I don't like it that cold. Mind you, I was talking to my friend Phil in Western Australia, and KD. Oh, sorry, I'm just having a brain seize.
VK6 ADF.
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a brain seize there. And Phil was telling me last week 47 degrees.
Yep.
I won't say what Mrs. B told me to tell him, but that's another story. It's been cold over here. Right, let's get started. Ham radio operators serving during the firestorms there out in California. And they have been tremendously horrible storm, that firestorm, and still raging, I believe. But Caryn, it's your side of the pond. What do you think on this one?
Well, the fires are indeed still raging, Martin. It looks as though, as we go to record this week's podcast, there might be some relief in sight. Certainly could change, but right now they're poised to get possible rain, very welcome rain over the weekend. So we hope for that. People listening will know by then if that indeed happened. But the Aries folks were certainly on the job, doing what was needed, and the ARRL was in touch with the folks who were out there passing traffic and getting the word out. A very remarkable situation occurred within the system of repeaters known as the Papa system. Perhaps not so remarkable. They take very good care of their equipment there, and it remained functional. The analog repeaters were taken aside, their nets were canceled, all regular traffic was canceled, and basically, the analog repeaters were devoted to emergency traffic only, with all the nets and conversational traffic moved onto the digital machines. So that worked for a couple of days until they could restore the nets to the analogs as well. Only one repeater was not in service, and that had less to do with the fires than just simple power failure. And they were attempting to get a generator up to that repeater, but there was too much fire activity in the area, and they could not safely get up the hill to do that. But that was a really excellent example of how a well-maintained repeater system can do wonderful things at what is probably one of the worst nightmares a region could have. So, as my friends in Australia might say, good on them. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I think the guys have done an absolutely marvellous job at trying to keep things going there. Those fires look horrendous. Dan, I know it's not close to you, but it's still your side of the world. What are you thinking on this?
Well, these fires really are quite bad. But even having said that, I really haven't heard anything about how ham radio has played a part in the relief effort. And, even this press release from the ARRL doesn't really have much detail. It says, oh, they're standing by and we've been in touch with these groups, but there's really no detail on what hams have actually done. So, I guess I don't have any further comment on that.
Well, maybe, Dan, it's maybe because it's still the fires are still happening that people haven't sort of sat down and looked and evaluated what everybody's been doing. So,
well, I agree, and that being the case, I think I would, if I had been the communications manager for the ARRL, I would have just held off on publishing this press release.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I wouldn't like to be over there with those fires personally, or that part of the world. Edmund, what do you think of those massive fires?
Well, first of all, of course, my heart goes out to absolutely everybody who'll have been affected by them. And I was interested to hear about the repeaters staying up, because the first thing that went through my mind when I saw some of the images was these fires, in addition to taking out broadcast transmitters and also the infrastructure probably for police, fire, ambulance, it could also potentially have taken out amateur repeaters as well. So I suppose one of the advantages that amateurs have over the aforementioned services is that we can do simplex, whereas I would imagine most handhelds, mobile radios being used by the fire brigade, etc., can't do simplex or can't do it easily, I would imagine it would have to go through a repeater that may have been knocked off the air. So hopefully one tiny silver lining that will come out of this as a side effect is good press for amateur radio, and maybe the contribution that amateurs are making are being prepared and willing to make themselves available if they are called upon. I mean, that is a contribution in itself, and it may be that the situations are such that the powers that be have not so far felt it necessary to call upon the amateurs, and of course the amateurs can't force the powers that be to call on them. So maybe that's the contribution. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, understood. And yeah, my guess is that police, fire, ambulance, those sort of things, although radios will do simplex, they're normally pre-programmed and the operators haven't a clue. They said, go to channel this, and whatever's programmed in that particular channel number is what they get. So, interestingly, we can sort of set up things on the fly where others can't. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, just particularly on the LA fires, I think the reason the world has heard about them more than perhaps other firestorms is the area it hit. It's an area where a lot of famous and wealthy people live, and of course that attracts publicity. But, these famous wealthy people will still be feeling the pain as the same as, should we say, normal people. Okay, they'll be insured and all the rest of it, but, they're going through the pains like everybody else. So in some ways, it's one of those things where they'll attract a lot of news, but maybe it's good they get the news because there needs to be more done against global warming. And the other point that I wanted to raise there was that the Caryn actually said about the repeaters, shutting off one repeater's usage to then dedicate it to emergency use. That's fine. The other approach is the approach that's taken in a lot of places, and you mentioned Australia, because obviously bushfires are not uncommon in Australia and haven't been for they've been around for many years. The club that I'm still a member of, the Central Coast Amateur Radio Club, they actually have extra repeaters for Wyson. Wyson is the amateur radio emergency network in Australia. So basically they share sites that are owned by the club and a couple of additional single sites, but they are actually completely separate equipment so that they're normally powered off except for tests, and then they get powered on when they're needed so that they are automatically dedicated for the emergency use. That's the reason they are there. So two different approaches, and both work, obviously. And I come back to what I say on a lot of these items about amateur radio in emergencies. I think the big value of an amateur radio enthusiast is that you have the skills. And I would hope that a lot of the amateur radio operators in the LA area are actually volunteering just to do whatever's needed. I'm sure they are, to help the emergency services. And that might not be operating a radio. That might be cleaning the portable toilets. It might be anything. It doesn't matter. Volunteer and help. And I think that's part of the amateur spirit, and rather proud that it is. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Well, I think in fairness, there has been loss of life, and our hearts do go out to the people who have had those losses and one thing or another. And I know this is not as important, but as one of you mentioned, the rich society around that part of the world, that there are a lot of people that are very wealthy, which probably means those people have got all sorts of things that are not replaceable. For argument's sake, paintings, artwork that's probably been burnt that are not replaceable. So there's been a massive impact, and insurance isn't going to bring things like that back or people's lives back. And that's the important thing in my books, is people's lives. But As I say, at least as we agree, amateur radio's done the best they can. So, moving to our next news story, which I quite like this one. There's a consultation being sought in the UK to allow amateur radio licensed operators from countries that are not in the CEPT agreement. So, I think if somebody can prove that they can do it and they obey the rules, as we do when we go to other countries, I think this has got to be a good thing. Edmund, what do you think?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I can't really see any objections or drawbacks to it, because I know for quite a while now that people in the UK who hold foundation or intermediate licenses have in some cases been able to operate abroad outside of the CEPT arrangements, but by contacting the licensing authority directly. For example, in my local radio club, there's an intermediate license holder who visits, I think it's Bulgaria, 2 or 3 times a year, and he's contacted the authorities there, and he's allowed to use, I'm not exactly sure if he's got a call sign out there as such, or just LZ/2E0, what the arrangement is. But yeah, anything that makes it easier, I think is worthy of support, and I can't see any immediately obvious objections to this, unless anybody else can. Maybe back to you, Martin.
Well, no, I think the other thing is, if we get an amateur from another, when you've got an amateur from another country, if they can operate in your country and you talk to them, say on VHF or UHF, there's the friendship, there's the sharing of knowledge, there's all sorts of things that I think are well worth considering. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Okay, well, to give the background to this, the Ofcom, which is the national regulator for the UK, have brought in what is actually a proposal, but basically, if nobody objects, it'll go through, no doubt, to try and simplify and reduce their work. That's the bottom line. Historically, there have been reciprocal license agreements between the UK and about 20 other countries. Then the CEPT arrangement came along, and the UK signed up to that for full license holders only, and many other countries signed up for full license holders only. Some countries sign up for the one for the intermediate license, and there's even now one starting up for foundation class under the CEPT umbrella. At the moment, the UK is only a member of the full license club. Now, what they're doing here is, if somebody was coming from one of these countries that previously or still has a reciprocal arrangement with the UK, let's say Uganda, I don't know if that's one of them, but let's say Uganda. Previously, they would have to apply before coming, and they would get a reciprocal license for 6 months. And that would cost, I think it's £28 or something. At the end of that 6 months, if they wanted to stay, they'd have to pay for another 6 months, and so on. If they wanted to move, then yes, they would apply for and get a full normal British amateur radio license if they're then living in the UK. But if they're only visiting for, let's say, 6-9 months or whatever, this was the process. Ofcom have looked at their records, and they've got hardly anybody has ever applied for this for the second 6-month renewal, so to speak. So, of the people that have used this process so far, they've only ever been in the UK for maybe 3 months, or 2 months, or 3 weeks, and they've now what the Ofcom have now said is, okay, 4 countries where there is a reciprocal arrangement and the amateur visiting has a full license in that country, they are allowed to operate in the UK without applying for a license simply by prefixing their call with M/ or MM/ or whatever for the different parts of the UK, the same as somebody coming from a CEPT country. So that makes, maybe the 10 applications that Ofcom get a year simply go away, and it costs them no money. People who, the one person in 5 years that comes and wants to stay for 9 months that's not from a CEPT country still has the option to then, at the end of the 3 months free, to pay his £28 to get a 6 months reciprocal license and so on. So that's the background of it. It's yes, it's good. No, it's not all classes of license. There is always that option. You can always apply to the regulator and say, look, I've got an intermediate license. Can I come in as a special arrangement, so to speak? I don't know if Ofcom would respond to that positively or not. I know some countries, the Eastern European countries, even Germany, will respond to that actually quite positively. But the end result is that if the country is not a CEPT signatory, why not? They might as well sign up, the foreign country, because the CEPT is not just Europe, or the CEPT is Europe. The signatories are not just from European countries. Australia, New Zealand, the US, Canada are all signed up to it, and others. So at the end of the day, this is going to help maybe half a dozen amateurs per year. But it helps the Ofcom department that they don't have the work. Back to you, Martin.
Well, if they don't have the work, it still allows people to operate in the UK, which I still think is a good thing. And, if they wanted to be awkward about it, you could say, well, if you're a full license, then you can have the full Monty of what UK licenses is. And if you're not a full license, you just issue somebody with the foundation license holder privileges. And in the UK, that is the only one that would hit most people in the UK is 25 watts maximum. But unlike the States, the UK gives you every band.
Yeah, it is very clear that this only applies to full licensees.
Yeah, at the moment. Yeah, but you know what?
Because the original reciprocal agreement between the countries from, let's say, 30, 40 years ago that this has been done under was only for full licenses.
Yeah.
So to change that, the other country would have to change as well. Yeah. And it ain't going to happen. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, but licenses do change, Ed, and I've seen so many changes in my license in the last 25 years. Anyway, Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, so far I've only operated in the United States, so I cannot speak from experience as a traveler with a radio. But I do know that when I saw this story, my first thought was that this is something that if other countries could look at this and if need be adopt something similar, that would really open things up. I know that the licensing procedures in different countries can be a real patchwork quilt of regulations and procedures, and so this sets a rather nice example while streamlining things. So I was pleased to see this. I'll be very surprised if it doesn't get approved. It makes good sense. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there, Karen, there is a very similar arrangement in the Americas with the FCC. So yeah, there are, shall we say, long-standing reciprocal arrangements between several countries in South America and the US, and the same kind of logic applies there.
This is helpful. I don't know how widespread it is, but it is nice to know that there's more to this than just what's happening in the UK. That's very, very encouraging.
Well, I agree with you. And while we were talking, I was just doing a quick count up, and I think I've operated inside 9 different countries. So I've operated as M1MRB, except for in the States where I actually hold a call sign there, but I've operated pretty much in 9 different countries. So I find it great that, we are able to talk about licenses. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think you guys covered it pretty cleanly there. I've never even operated from Canada, and I'm like 50 miles to Canada as the crow flies. So that's about all I've got to say on it.
Well, it is very useful, Dan. And okay, if you haven't gone over the border, your country's massive. I mean, we were on the road for hours on our road trip, yeah, I've been lucky that I've operated, I think, from 9 different countries. Not all of them particularly big, but yeah. So it's a good one as we go forward. And let's hope that it all gets moved forward in the right direction. Moving to our next news story, ham radio in Ireland. The digital magazine is back. Caryn, I'm going to be a very naughty boy here and say I didn't know that they'd lost it. So do you want to go first?
Sure thing, Martin. It hasn't been gone that long, so I'm sure they wouldn't mind that you didn't miss them. They stopped publication in or around September. They're a free digital download with greater appeal than their original concept, which when they launched in 2022, they were very regional. Then they discovered how much appeal the subject matter had, and they were getting enthusiastic folks writing for them and sending things in, and so they expanded it to all of Ireland. But I've spoken or emailed with 2 members of the editorial team, and they said the well ran dry a little bit on material, but they're finding now that there's great enthusiasm to bring it back and to fill its pages, and they're confident that this will actually now have global appeal. In fact, they're asking people around the world to send in stories. So you don't have to be in Ireland. You don't have to ever have operated from Ireland. Send in anything because amateur radio is amateur radio. And the contributions would be sent to one of the editorial team members, Steve Wright. I will give his email address. It is Wright, WRIGHT, at gmail.com. Okay, that is Steve Wright, WRIGHT, at gmail.com. The first downloads will become available Sunday, January 26th. So this podcast is very timely for that. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, that's good news. Good news, Caryn. And yeah, I can understand the well getting a bit dry at times. I mean, we've had a feature for the last 447 of them. I haven't done all of them, but I've probably done the lion's share. And if you'd asked me what the feature is for this episode while we're recording this, with about 4 days before we release, I haven't got a clue, guys. But there will be one. Hi. Anyway, Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Well, I was the same as you, Martin. I hadn't realised that this magazine had temporarily disappeared either. I have read it on occasions, on and off, since its creation, but I make a special effort to look out for it, and I wish them every success, of course.
Yeah. I was to say, anybody who does these things, I wish them success, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work there. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, I have 2 thoughts here. One is that I like the idea of it being a more international kind of publication. I think that'd be great. I might even have something I can send them to publish. The other thing is a little less positive. Right now, you can only access this thing via Facebook. And if you're not a Facebook fan, you don't get access to it. So I would encourage them to set up a separate website or something where you don't have to go through Facebook to get it.
Oh, I want to jump in if I may. Links are going to be available on other social media platforms too. So Facebook is not the only place to go. If you do go to Facebook, it's downloadable from the page Ham Radio Ireland, and I think there is one other link which I will look for. Perhaps we can put in the show notes for people, and that would be a direct download. And I'll look for that while we continue with our roundtable.
Yeah, thank you, Caryn, for that one. Ed, last words on this one?
Yeah, just to be sure, I'm pretty sure looking at this is not an official magazine of the National Society. I think they have their own. So this is an independent magazine who changed their name last year as well. Again, because it was more local previously, I guess. Is it the IRTS is the National Society in Ireland? I think it is. But this is just a group of amateurs doing it, and good on them. All power to their elbows and everything else. So yeah, same comment that Dan made. I don't want to go near Facebook. Thank you very much. And other social media platforms that are owned by the same crowd are also not of appeal. A website's the best bet. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. The website's the best bet. The problem is with all the social media at the moment, and there's me throwing a hand grenade in the room, is people keep moving to the newest, shiniest thing. So people set up all sorts of good things, and then somebody else comes up with a shiny option, and they jump off onto the next shiny option, and it's just diluting A, the content, and B, making it more and more difficult to find it, in my opinion. Anyway, that's enough of me whinging. I can't help it, but that was my feeling.
I just have a quick question here.
Go on, Dan.
So does anybody know how many radio amateurs there actually are in Ireland?
Well, there's only about 4 million people, and over half of them live in Dublin. I'm guessing from what I've seen years ago, no more than about 10,000, if that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would have guessed.
Yeah, but I could be wrong, and I'm not slapping the Irish people. They've made me very welcome, and I've been over there. But from a remembrance of looking at a call book years ago, I don't think there's more than about 10,000 max. Would be where I'll be.
2,000.
Eh?
2,000?
Oops, where am I getting this from again? According to the SOTA Ireland brochure, there are almost 2,000 licensed amateur radio operators in Ireland, over 80,000 in the UK. Yes, so 2,000 it seems to be the number.
All right,
and that's from IRTS, which is the National Society.
Yeah, that's a lot less than I thought there was, Ed. So yeah, that's even worrying.
I've got another one here from QSL.net, and they say 1,700. So
yeah,
but that was back in 2001. So yeah, around 2,000 sounds to be right.
Yeah. Now they don't call them radio amateurs in Ireland; they're called amateur experimenters,
as we all were initially.
Yeah, as we all were, but that's slight thing. But yeah, only a small number. And Colin isn't one of them. Hi. Oh dear, I'll get into trouble for that one. Right, let's move on before I get into serious trouble. Okay, I've got the story down as girls missed the bus, but no, that isn't true, is it, Caryn? There was an event happened in India, and there was a little bit of a panic because a couple of girls got on a bus and their chaperones and parents didn't. So, Caryn, round to you first.
Yeah, the problem is the girls didn't miss the bus, but grandma and mom did. So that was a big problem. The bus was at the second largest gathering of Hindu pilgrims in India, and there was a massive crowd. The Gangar Sagar Mela festival was wrapping up and people were going home. And this gathering is probably the size of a small city, if not a large city. So you can imagine the size of the crowd. And these little girls, very young girls, one of the younger of the two being 3, she gets on with her older sister and the bus pulls out. And mom and grandma cannot join them on the bus because the crowd getting in the way. They can't climb up and go through the door of the bus. Bus pulls out. The girls are gone. And mama understandably gets quite hysterical, emotionally upset. Now, at this festival, our friends, the West Bengal Radio Club, we hear so much about them assisting at cyclones and earthquakes and all sorts of disasters. They're very well trained in personal and regional emergencies. Well, ham radio training came into play here as well. One of the amateurs, Saborni Nag Biswas, was there at the bus stand, and she was assisting people who'd gotten separated from other people, which is very common at a gathering this size. The woman's distress was very apparent to her. The woman asked, "Please help me, help me." Saborni remembered that there were drones overhead. There were lots of drones to help with security, and I believe in some cases even drop some food to people. Because again, imagine something this massive near the Ganges River. Well, she got in touch by phone with the operator of the drone, and since mom could not remember the bus, what it looked like, the number of the bus, or anything identifying the bus, had the drone operator go in search of the bus from the air, and they managed to find it. At that point, Saborni and the Kolkata police went in the direction of where the drone said the bus was. Bus was stopped and didn't take very long. Girls were brought back to mom and grandma. So tragedy averted, quick thinking. The lesson here is ham radio operators are well trained with or without their radios to know a situation and to help handle it. So happy ending. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, certainly was a happy ending. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, our friends over there in India are really on top of these things, and it's interesting to see these stories. And certainly is good news that the family was reunited.
I give that 100% on that one. And yeah, on that one. Ed, what's your thoughts?
I really can't add anything to what's been said.
No? Well, it's nice that Caryn gave us the full story, which is good. And, India does seem to be a place where amateur radio really is part of society and really growing out there. So it's a good one, in my opinion. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Sorry, I've got a bit of a coughing fit here. Nothing to add, Martin.
All right. So nothing to add. Okay, no problems. Well, as I say, good news that they found the students, not a problem. The children, which is a good one. Okay, because you guys didn't have much to add, I'll add a story, a true story, not amateur radio, but just so you're aware. I have 2 sons and a daughter. We were at an air show, must have been at least 35 years ago, and there were about 200,000 people at this air show, massive one. And the boys took my daughter off with them. They were playing in amongst the crowd, knew where we were. And my daughter was 3 at the time. And we lost our daughter at this air show. And you can imagine, I can feel for these people the panic they must have been in. We eventually asked somebody, and they said, go over to this corner where they'd got a roped off area with some poor old policeman who was near retirement, and he had a police van, and all these children were running riot over his police van and having a whale of a time. And I said to him about it, and he said, "Which one's yours?" And I pointed my daughter out in the far thing. He said, "Don't worry, when she comes over, she'll bawl her eyes out. But look at her, she's having great fun now." God, I was really concerned at the time. So I kind of understand where these mum and granny went through. They would have been in full-scale panic mode. Anyway, enough of me wittering on. Last news story. DMR radios open up the world to students in India. Another Indian story. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can do. And I think the special thing about this story is, we've heard about expanding education and amateur radio being part of it. And that's very much the case in India, especially in some of the regions that they're going to here. One of the purposes of getting amateur radio into those areas and getting 2 or 3 students licensed is obviously for emergency situations, whether it be floods, fires, earthquakes. India's got the lot. But there's another side to this story as well, because they see the use of DMR and the network of DMR radios around the world to other schools, to other students, to professors in other places as a way of expanding education across borders, so that somebody working on a project on whatever, space research, may well use amateur radio's DMR channel to talk to somebody else working on the same kind of work in another school at the other side of the world. I think it has gone from being, yes, they need it for emergency reasons, to being, this is a good idea. Like we link scout packs during JOTA. This is something not just for a special event, but all the time, to have links between students working in schools that have also then taken the exam and got licensed, and their equivalents in other parts of the world. And it's education, but it's also camaraderie. And India's the only place that, this is the first time I've heard of anybody trying to do this in such a way. So maybe this is a lead from India that other places need to follow. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way of doing it. I'm glad they chose DMR, and at the risk of upsetting ICOM and Yaesu, DMR equipment is the cheap option. And if you're going to go to countries that are poorer than the UK and the States, then a cheaper option, it makes a lot of sense on that one. Caryn, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, you actually made the point, Martin, that I was going to make. How wonderfully affordable these little HTs are makes this an extremely accessible and very appropriate mode for this kind of environment. So it should go very, very well. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about it in the months ahead.
Well, as I say, it's DMR is certainly something that I've always been very interested in ever since I came across it when I worked for one of the dealers many moons ago. I was an amateur, but it was before it even got excited in amateur use. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm a little confused here about how these radios are connected. Like, so that you put a radio in some village in India, but how does that connect to the rest of the world?
Well, the same way as we do, Dan. Either they have a repeater or they'll have a hotspot. And
well, okay, so in that case, I still don't see the sense of the radio. Why don't we just connect everybody up to Zoom meeting?
Possibly because there aren't hundreds of internet connections. Probably they could put one hotspot in the school and, or one repeater at a school, and then all the students could use that. So not only could they do simplex amongst themselves, but if they wanted to do worldwide, I don't know. I'm guessing, Dan.
Yeah. No, but you see my point here. It's like,
Yeah,
it would have been interesting to know a little bit more about how this is actually going to work.
Yeah, I think the dual purpose is the key point here for what internet connectivity they do have and is required, obviously, for linking between DMR systems. In emergencies, that's probably gone. And therefore, we're back to using these DMR radios simplex for emergency coverage for MCOMs. And they're already there in some of these remote villages, which, is that better than having HF? It'd be nice to have both, but if you've got one tool that can do two things, that's probably the way they're thinking.
Yeah, as you say, it's an interesting one. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think DMR is a good choice for the very reasons that you said. It's the cheapest option, and although it can have a rather particular audio quality, it's probably easier for the untrained ear to listen to than, say, a weak SSB signal on HF. But beyond that, there's not really anything I can think of to add, Martin.
Right, well, I know you're suffering with a bug at the moment, and I thank you for joining us. So, and I know you're struggling, but I think DMR's the right choice. I think it's interesting. It gives them a bit more on it, and the DMR infrastructure is out there, which is a good thing as well. Right, that concludes our news stories. Let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we spoke. Now, we always go ladies first on this group, don't we, Caryn? So you've been stitched up again.
Here we go. Okay, well, we've got Winter Field Day coming this weekend. I'm still not sure what I will be doing, whether I will be operating with a club or operating from the home QTH. That is very weather dependent, but that's a nice event. I'm looking forward to being a part of it in some way. I will continue my participation in Straight Key Month as K3Y stroke 2. Really enjoying that. I always do with the Straight Key Century Club. That runs through the end of the month. Then we've got to wait 11 months till the next one, but it's a great event. POTA, not in this weather. I've been hunting. I've been chasing POTA mostly. I look forward to whatever thawing out we may get that makes going back into the parks a little more bearable. So I will continue that. The other thing I'd like to mention, and the less said, the better about it, but I wouldn't be completely honest if I didn't at least say something. I'm struggling at the moment with a DMR issue, probably an out of date hotspot that has run its course. So I'm very much missing a lot of wonderful DMR chats with folks, and I do hope to be up and running again soon with that. That would include, of course, the ICQ podcast talk group, which I have enjoyed, and a number of talk groups with friends both locally and across the country. So that's where the situation stands here in the deep freeze in the Arctic. I could work myself and pretend I'm contacting Antarctica the way it is, but it is winter. I prefer it to summer, so I will not complain. Okay, Martin, that's it for me.
Okay, well, if you still get in trouble round weekend time, would be a good time for me to be able to help you with your DMR if you haven't got help your side the pond. But I don't want to interfere. I know there's some good guys your side the pond as well. But if you're really stuck, give me a shout at the weekend, Caryn, and we'll get that done. One other thing I know that you, Ed and Edmund, are doing, and I guess that I'm going to ask you first, it's dog and cat events. When are they happening?
Oh, that's August. We're in the planning stages now, and Ed, feel free to jump in as well, and Edmund. It's in the planning stages, the discussion stages right now. We're working on a way to smoothly and seamlessly elevate the awards and the endorsements for this year's event, which is a true international event with more hams and more countries participating. We'd like to bring about the equivalent of a clean sweep. I think, Ed, you referred to it as a full kennel, which I love that idea. And we're in the process right now of trying to troubleshoot a logging software that will really integrate everybody's contacts. So we're real excited about it. The event draws attention to the plight of abused, abandoned, neglected, and other animals, dogs, and cats in two separate events. Animals in need of assistance. It's a public service event. So that's where we're at with that. Guys, again, please feel free to jump in.
Well, that's good news, Caryn. And okay, you've got till August. We will keep you guys updated. Caryn and Edmund and Ed will keep you updated of when the event's happening and any developments along the way. ICQ tends to get involved in all sorts of things as we go forward. Dan, what have you been up to?
Well, so I've been like Caryn. I've been kind of anxious to get out on POTA, but of course it's just so cold here. I'm not going to be doing anything for Winter Field Day. It's just too cold. But I've been finishing up my report to ARDC on my grant and preparing the proposal for the new grant. Hopefully I'll get another grant this year to do this again in 2025. And I've also prepared a talk on my experiences in 2024. So I delivered that to our club just last night. So that's really all I've been doing. I haven't been working on any cool technical projects lately, but I need to get back to doing that.
Well, that's understandable. I mean, it is a bit cold and you're not wanting to get out in it. I must admit, it doesn't do me any excitement to go out in the cold. But at least you keep yourself busy, and there's a lot goes on in the background. But between all of us, between episodes, I know that a number of us contact each other all the time. So there's various little projects going on all the time. Whether they surface or not is another matter. But there you go. I'm going to go to Ed next because give Edmund's voice a little bit of a recovery, and I know he's been up to a couple of things that I know he's been up to. So Ed, what have you been up to?
Well, I've got my little list here as usual. I've had some book editing and article editing work that I've been doing on, and some documentation for things all around amateur radio. I've also done a couple of POTA activations, or as I like to call them now, PLOTA activations, because in this weather, in POTA, you can actually operate from within your car, as long as the car park is within the park or on the trail. And so the POTA activations of the last few weeks, and the one I'll be doing tomorrow, is what I would call parking lots on the air, but it's POTA parks. So I've done a few of those. Martin, you jumped in and covered the next point, which is the fact, and Caryn has as well, the International Dog Day or International Cat Day in August. We've had a couple of meetings. We're chasing some of the developers of a certain website, which will give us coordinated login, generation of certificates, QSL cards, and also the ability for the people calling the special events to see if they're actually in the log in real time. So all of those nice features that you like to see an organised special event with. There's also a teamwork side of that to ensure that in the countries where the same call sign is actually shared or is actually used even concurrently, but on different modes on different bands. That needs to be coordinated, and that also is part of this system. So we'll keep on working on that. We've got until August to get it all in place, but we'll probably be doing some trials. Well, I hope we'll be doing some trials well before that. The other things between the last ICQ and this one, I've had a birthday, my wife's had a birthday, and we've had a wedding anniversary. So we've had various celebrations around those. And yeah, the last thing on my list is something that I've been wanting to build for a while, and somehow I managed to find the time. I'm actually putting together a portable amplifier in a box. So for HF bands, basically feed it with a QRP transceiver, and the other side you get 100 watts out, or thereabouts, 90 to 140, depending which band, with a built-in tuner, built-in all kinds of different things, battery as well, so that I've got literally a box I can pick up and take with me for, not for summit activations, it's a bit too heavy for that, but activations actually out in the park rather than in the car. So it'll be a nice unit to just take with me, plug in, turn on, and forget about. At least that's the theory. And we all know how theory works out in practice. Over to you, Martin.
All right. Well, I'm going to say a belated birthday greeting to you. You aren't in my calendar for some reason. I've just checked for the last 2 months, so I don't have your birthday date. And I know I screwed Bill's up the other day, but yeah, and sounds like you are doing some interesting stuff with the radio as well, Ed. Right, Edmund, I know you've been out playing today, so over to you.
Well, not really. Amberley Museum has now reopened for 2025, so I went up there, but I don't think we went on the air at all. It was mainly things like maintenance and updating software on computers and paperwork and discussions with fellow volunteers and all that kind of thing. So not much radio was done, but the call sign Golf Bravo 2 Charlie Papa Mike GB2 Chalk Pits Museum should be on the air fairly frequently from now through until December of this year. In terms of radio I've done, I haven't really done any recently. If you're listening to this on the day that it's released, Sunday the 26th of January, then from midday till 3 p.m. GMT is the latest edition of 145 Alive, which is aimed to generate simplex activity on 2 meters FM. So have a listen between 145.200 and 145.575, and you hopefully will be able to hear lots of people and work lots of people. And not only is it a UK-wide event, also the Republic of Ireland are scheduled to have a few stations on the air as well. So it's an all-Britain and all-Ireland event this time round. Assuming, of course, that everybody's antennas don't get destroyed by the named storm that's coming through. I think it's mainly Saturday, isn't it? Friday and Saturday, but hopefully everybody's antennas will stay safe, and there'll be a lot of people on 2 meters on Sunday afternoon. Not going to the Canvey Island Rally the first weekend in February because that's been cancelled. I think we mentioned this in the last podcast, didn't we? From memory, they lost the venue at relatively short notice and there wasn't enough time to organise an alternative venue. So that rally is cancelled for this year, but hopefully it is just this year and they'll be back in Canvey Island in February 2026. After that, the 15th of February, I think from memory, is Thinking Day on the air. There are moves afoot by certain people here in West Sussex to get a station of some description on the air from somewhere with the Girl Guides. So if indeed it does happen, then I'll probably be involved in that. And then last but not least, the following Saturday, the 22nd, is the next edition of 433 Alive, which is to the 70 centimetre band what 145 Alive is to 2 metres, with the exception that 145 Alive has net controllers and pre-assigned frequencies and all that kind of thing, whereas with 433 you just go on 70 sems, and as long as you don't cause QRM to anybody else, you can basically do whatever you like. But both of those events are just designed really to get activity on VHF and UHF. They're not contests, there's no awards or certificates. It's purely amateur radio for the fun of it and for the social talking to people side of it. I haven't quite decided yet where I'm going to be for that. There is, not too far away from here, there is a hill called Chanctonbury Ring, which is one of the highest points in Sussex. Haven't been there since the 1990s, I don't think. Last time I walked up there was with my mum and dad many years ago. And there's a car park a little way up, but you have to hoof most of the way to the top. So as well as being a good vantage point, it's also a 1 point SOTA summit, and it's a POTA reference. It's just inside the South Downs National Park, and there's a trig point up there for anybody going for the Work to All Britain Trig Point Award, if indeed that is still a thing. So I was kind of toying with the idea of going up there, but whether the weather will be good enough for me to do that in February, or whether I would do better to wait 3-4 months whenever till the next event, that remains to be seen. So I haven't done much recently, Martin, but as the new year rolls on a bit and the days get longer and it gets a bit warmer, hopefully I will start doing a few more amateur radio things. Back to you.
Yeah, no problems at all. Well, you've also given us some hints of other stuff that's happening, and you're quite right. Right, so what have I been up to? Well, like I always say, not as much as I'd like to. Yeah, I'm back with 2 meters and 70 sems again in the car, and it's working. Been on the talk group. Did have a chat, a long chat the other day with Phil down in Australia, which is always pleasurable. And you joined in that conversation as well, didn't you? So that was good fun, Edmund. I fixed my mag mount that I broke. I've got more than one mag mount, but I fixed one of the mag mounts. I was going into Gatwick Airport car park, and I forgot I had the antenna on the roof, and a height restriction whacked the antenna, and the antenna didn't fold over. The mag mount went to fall over, and it broke the mag mount away from the magnet. So I had the magnet stuck to the roof and the other bit rolling around on top. So I managed to glue that back together and check it with the antenna analyzer and make sure it all was working properly. So that was great. Also had another antenna, the 2 meters 70 sems antenna, a very short one that's useful for going in and out of car parks, doesn't hit the barriers, and that went wrong. And I took it apart and all the bits and pieces, and I really couldn't work out why it just wouldn't tune up. Just wouldn't tune at all. I suspect that the very bottom down by the PL259 connector has probably got a coil and a capacitor, an inductor and a capacitor, and I'm guessing one of those has gone faulty, because I couldn't get it to tune anywhere near a sensible frequency on 2 meters or 70 sems band. So anyway, couldn't get it apart, so it's gone in the bin. You have to take thing on that. Edmund's right, 145 Alive on Sunday the 26th. I will be on Epsom Downs. Ed, you're welcome to join me, but I won't be doing much of the operating. I'm there just to assist a couple of the club members that like to have me along to deal with any problems. Did have my first play with a Rig Expert analyzer. Now, the one I had to play with the other day was an HF only, but I was really, really impressed with the Rig Expert analyzer. Wouldn't mind one myself, but I'd have to go for the one that goes up to UHF because I do a lot on VHF and UHF, and that would do me. Working on a couple of projects with Frank, and if they come to fruition, you'll obviously hear more about it. And Edmund and I also attended Sutton and Cheam's club meeting, where we had a gentleman, David Fry, gave a lecture on Gerard Marcuse, who is a fantastic, interesting guy that very early on in amateur radio or radio history did some wonderful things. Unfortunately, died in the 60s, and he was probably the most famous amateur in my area because he was born here. Edmund, you still hold the call sign, which is allocated to Amberley Chalk Pits Museum as well. And I know you're the license holder, but it was a good talk. So I'm really pleased about that. So that's what I've been up to. Unless you want to comment on any of that, Edmund.
Well, one of the bits of admin and paperwork that I did today was the QSL card that Jerry Marcuse never received 100 years ago because the post office deemed that the envelope was insufficiently addressed. Gentleman got hold of that, gave it to you, Martin, at the National Hamfest last year. You kindly delivered it to my home, and today, it being the first time since then that I've been up to the museum, today I handed it over officially to the curator and filled in the paperwork to make it a legitimate donation or transfer of an object into the collection. So, 100 years after the QSL card was filled in, it has finally reached the location where Golf 2 November Mike, which these days is a club call sign that I have the great honour to hold, amongst others. The card has now arrived in its current spiritual home, Martin. How about that?
Well, that's good news, mate. That's good news. So, all being all, I feel hopefully it's given some of our listeners something interesting to hear about. Right. Well, all that's left for me to do now is to thank you guys for turning up and joining me. It's been a pleasure. And then I'm going to have to move on to the next part of the podcast. So I'd like to thank Caryn, KD2GUT. Thanks for joining us, Caryn.
And thank you, Martin. It's always good, and we're off to a good start for 2025. Those of you in cold climates, stay warm.
Yeah, I'll give you that one. I think we all stay warm. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, you're very welcome, Martin. I'm always glad to appear.
Yeah, good one, Dan. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer G0. Sorry, not G0. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
If I was going to be a G0, I'd have to go and pass a CW test, wouldn't I? That would never do. Cheers, Martin. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, cheers, mate. And you wouldn't, because I think they're giving G's away soon anyway. And last but not least, Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP.
Yeah, as always, thanks for the invite, Martin. And since this is my first ICQ of the new year, may I wish everybody listening wishes to stay healthy, to stay hearty in the hobby all the way through 2025.
Yeah, and I agree with 100% what you said, Ed. Let's hope 2025 is a good one. Right, 73, guys, and we'll catch you again soon. 73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with news here that the RSGB has announced that they are now an official partner for British Science Week. And then this is an event run by the British Science Association. So the idea of this whole venture is that the RSGB comms team are going to offer an amateur radio related activity and will feature in the British Science Week community pack. So basically continuing the link between amateur radio and the STEM campaign. So British Science Week will run between the 7th and the 16th of March with the theme of change and adapt. Not just for young people, it really is about the whole community, friends and family too. So I say anybody that's got interest in science, amateur radio, STEM, etc. will certainly get some use out of this. We'll put a link to this event on the ICQ Podcast webpage for you, so you can get more information on what's coming up. Now there's a special event. Stations are taking place throughout 2025 to celebrate the European Capital of Culture. Now it's a German event, and the special event stations are going to be DL 2025B, DL 2025C, E, S and W. There's also a period currently running through to the end of March where there'll be a special event award for call signs with that C suffix on the end. So certainly get involved in this. Great opportunity for you to take involved. And as I say, the capital culture is a town of Chemnitz, I think it's pronounced. So Chemnitz, spelled Chemnitz. But say wonderful opportunity, lots of levels to get involved, EU, non-EU, German participation levels, etc. Different awards for different levels. So a great opportunity to get involved here. Again, as always, we'll put a link to this on the ICQ Podcast webpage for you. And talking about opportunities to celebrate, there's a new trophy, a GB9RG trophy, is to celebrate a first amateur radio contact via satellite. And it's an event that's going to be taking place by the guys at AMSAT Switzerland. And it's encouraging hams to make extreme long-distance contacts via amateur radio satellites. It recognises Dr. Hans Rudolf Lauber, whose call sign is attributed to the trophy, HB9RB, and his contribution to ham radio. So certainly a great opportunity. The event is going to run for 2 weeks in March, so as I say, plenty of time to get set up and ready to go, and there's a list of rules that will be available for you on the ICQ Podcast webpage. Right, we're going to head to our features episode, and this episode's feature is Did You Know Q&A. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ Podcast.
Hi guys, for this feature, I thought we'd do something a little bit different. I've also been answering some questions, so I'm going to call this questions and answers. But before we start me giving you the answers, I'm going to give you a couple of questions, just little ones to think about. Not too difficult, but just interesting, I thought. First one was I came across a guy demonstrating this on the internet. Now, this is something we don't do, but it's still very valid. The gentleman was showing a 6-volt battery, a 6-volt bulb, and connecting a battery to a bulb. And obviously the bulb lights up. Nothing strange about that, in fairness. Then the guy said, what would happen if I put a voltmeter in series with the bulb? What's going to happen to the bulb? I'll leave you to ponder that one while I carry on for a minute. The next one was, we were talking about this the other day as well. If you're operating on 40 meters, your dial is set to 7 megs exactly, spot on 7 megs. You're running lower sideband. What is the problem with that? Why would that be a problem? And while you think about that one, I'll answer both at the end of this. Okay, we were talking about dummy loads at the club the other day and one thing and another, and it got me thinking. You can make your own dummy loads, but there was a few things that suddenly occurred to me. The obvious one is you try to get as close to 50 ohms as you can. But with standard type resistors, you're very rarely going to get that close. And if you take, for argument's sake, putting resistors in parallel, the resistance you're going to get is going to be lower than the lowest resistor value you've got. All right, guys, you can work that out on mathematically if you want, but trust me, it's always going to be lower than the lowest resistor value. So if you've got two 100s, it should be 50 ohms if 200 ohm resistors are in parallel. However, if the tolerance is slightly wrong and one of them is, say, 98 ohms or something, then it will be below 50. The more resistors you put in parallel, the more closer you will get to the 50 ohms, but it will still be lower than the lowest resistor. The other thing, I've always been told use carbon resistors, and kind of it suddenly dawned on me, you need carbon composite resistors if you're going to make a dummy load. Because if you use carbon film, effectively what they do is cut a spiral track on the film. And what is a spiral track? An inductor. So that would worry me. You're effectively, if you're using carbon film resistors to make a dummy load, you're effectively adding inductance. Now, all right, the inductance of the coil might be quite high. The resistance of the coil might be quite high, but you're still adding inductance, which at certain frequencies will make a big difference to your dummy load. So if you're going to build a dummy load, go for one with carbon composite resistors. And if you're buying one personally from a dealer, make sure it covers the frequencies you want. Because even commercial dummy loads don't always cover the frequencies that you want, because they have capacitance and inductance, and at higher frequencies, if they're not built very well, they might work great at HF, but at UHF, I've seen them up to 3-to-1 for a dummy load, which will really throw you. Now, okay, I don't like working outside in the cold. Let's be honest about it. When it's cold and miserable, I don't want to be out there. And I had to do some work on a dual band VHF, UHF antenna. And I've got an MFJ 269, a very early one, probably a Mark 1 actually, but I've had it over 20 years. And I was thinking about this. Why can't I put the antenna straight onto the analyzer? Well, you can. But then I suddenly spotted on top of my analyzer a earth terminal. And I thought, you idiot, why don't you put a ground plane on the earth unit there? Now, if you've got a different type of antenna analyzer, you can always put a earth around the outside of the connector plug. At worst come to worst, if you've got a big enough crocodile clip, you can actually clip it on the earth of the socket as well. So, just a thought, it worked very well for me, and the one I did get to work worked. Another antenna, unfortunately, went in the bin because it was broken. Now, coming back to what we said earlier, the voltmeter in series with a bulb, what will happen with the bulb? Well, I'm sure most of you got, if not all of you, the bulb doesn't light up. Why? Because the voltmeter has resistance, quite a high resistance. And you put a resistor in series with another resistor, you actually have a potential divider. Now, when the bulb is cold, as it would be, it is pretty much a short circuit. You take, for instance, a AVO meter, AVO 8 in the UK, a Simpson meter in the US, for argument's sake. They're 20,000 ohms per volt. On the 10 volt range, that's 200k. So you've got a 200k resistor in series with effectively a short circuit. All the voltage is going to be dropped across that 200k resistor, which is effectively a multimeter, 10 volt range. So the bulb doesn't light up. Also, there's no current going through. very, very little current going through, so the bulb is never going to light up. So just an obvious one, I know, but I thought it was an interesting one because, if you've got somebody who's being a bit cocky or you want to have a club quiz on, you could throw that one in the mix. Next one. Okay, I said if you're operating on 7 megahertz in the 40 meter band exactly using a lower sideband, what are you doing wrong? Well, first off, lower sideband is going to go below 7 megs, so you're out of band. Straight away you're out of band. So that's the first no-no. Number 2, if you live in the States, the band plans are mandatory. So therefore, if you were down there and doing that, you'd be transmitting outside the band. So if you were doing SSB, be transmitting below frequency, but you'd also be transmitting SSB in the Morse part of the band. So the band plans in the US are far more rigid. But that doesn't mean to say the UK, although the UK, the band plans are only advisory, it doesn't mean to say that you're doing the right thing, because your license says you're not supposed to cause interference to other users. So even if you were operating upper sideband, right on the edge of the band, you would still be interfering with Morse code operators, and you're not supposed to do that. And lastly, pretty much anywhere in the world, I would suggest, you aren't going to get any contacts, because nobody's going to be looking for you down there. Either that or they get very annoyed with you because you're causing them interference. So, just a couple of quickies, nothing major, and let's hope you got some enjoyment from this.
The ICQ Podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, everybody, really hope you enjoyed our features episode, and as always, a thought-provoking Q&A to, I suppose, check some of the knowledge that either we should know or may have forgotten, as other really cool things go into those wonderful brains of ours. So, as always, we always hope there's always a little bit in there that enlightens things from that side of things. And I know that this is always one of your fun things of the bits and pieces that people forget or they disregard and don't think are really clever, which are the sort of things that can get you out of a jam on a really basic deployment level. Sometimes it can save money or save time, etc., that people just forget because they sometimes think, oh, well, just go and buy something or just go and get someone to do something, rather than thinking through things at a nice micro small level.
Yeah, I must admit, I do like to try and share knowledge. I don't like to sort of say it's mine, I'm not telling anybody. So, hopefully I'm not teaching people to suck eggs, but I do like to share. I think it's fair to do that. So, a lot of the questions and answers are, if I've answered it for one person, I often think it's a bit like being in a classroom. The kid that sticks his hand up probably is asking the question for half the people in the room. So nicely, if I cover something with somebody, I think sometimes it's worth just covering it, because there may be others out there that need the information, and I can't take it with me. So there you go, Colin.
Yeah, true. Well, in fairness, we were talking the other day about something that I was doing, and you gave me the simplest way of solution that would have been that I'd spent weeks trying to find this right part, and you gave me a lovely solution to get around it. So I definitely do agree with you. It's definitely about sharing that information so we think it through from there. Right, well, as I say, we appreciate Sean Borgerson, KK7 Oscar Victor Foxtrot, for his very kind donation to the ICQ podcast this episode. We really hope you've got some knowledge and some opinions and some thoughts on this episode show, and we suggest that you head to ICQpodcast.com/donate, where you can express that value you got from today's show in a monetary figure and send it our way. It really does help us to pay our way, etc. Things like the newsletter, the talk group, and the show and the website, etc., all needs paying for, so those donations go towards those areas. So we'd really appreciate you doing that. If you're there as well, consider setting up a monthly and annual subscription donors. The guys that have already done that is a great help. It does give us a bit of a base that then donations like Sean's on top then top up, and we'd really ask you to consider that for us. So please visit ICQPodcast.com/donate. We'd like to thank Dan, KB6 November uniform, Caryn, KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa for taking part in the news roundtable with Ed. So thanks a lot for joining us there, guys. Right, well, that just wraps up episode 448 of your ICQ Amateur Radio podcast. The last thing, obviously, to do is to give you the most important job I think you get every weekend when we do a podcast, which is to find a treat for Mrs. B in the cupboard and to make her a cup of tea to look after this weekend.
It's not just every podcast, Colin. I make lots of cups of tea for your mum throughout the week, but all worth it. I know she enjoys them. And I'm off now to put the kettle on, finding an extra nice treat today, I think. And don't forget, as Colin said, we're doing a week's time. I'll say 73 then, Colin.
No, just to gently correct you, we're doing it in a fortnight's time, my dear boy. Where's this weekly time thing? I just suddenly realised there was more work coming my way.
There was. I got it wrong again.
Oh, no. You're such an amateur. Right, we'll do it again in a fortnight's time, as he says. So we'll catch up with it. 73's all.
Yeah, 73.